Great. Distinguished experts, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to all of you. My name is Elisabeth Türk. I'm the director of UNECE's Economic Cooperation and Trade Division. And it's my great pleasure this morning to moderate this regional policy dialogue on harnessing trade and economic cooperation to accelerate the circularity transition in the UNECE region. We are delighted to have so many experts and representatives of member states, international organizations, and stakeholders be here with us today. And before we go into the substance of our discussion, I'd like to extend our immense gratitude to UNDP for their technical support to make today's event a reality, and also to Sitra, the Finnish Innovation Fund, for making our event here today being part of the World Circular Economy Forum. We do have a very rich agenda this morning, and we split the agenda into different segments. First, we have a high-level opening. Then we have a segment for exchange amongst government-type representatives. Thirdly, we have a segment for exchange with other stakeholders. And finally, we close with some closing remarks. Before we start, allow me to share some housekeeping remarks. So first of all, I'm very pleased that we are able to provide English-Russian interpretation. I understand we will have some speakers in English, others in Russian. So for the audience, please do choose the language in which you would like to listen to the debate. Second, some information about the virtual platform. As speakers, we cannot really see the audience. The audience is muted, but there are two ways to engage with the audience. On the one hand, there is the chat, and the UNECE team will also be posting information in the chat. And the chat for us is an informal way of engagement. And in addition, after the opening segment, we will do a little icebreaker. We will use a software called Mentimeter to hear from the audience, to get the feel of who is in the audience and what's their interest in circular economy transition. So please do keep your iPhone, your phone, your tablet handy to engage. Third housekeeping remark, many thanks once again to UNDP for the IT and translation support. We have very good hands with them. So any questions you have on the IT or logistics side, please do pose it in the chat. UNDP colleagues are monitoring the chat. And finally, a quick reminder that the session is being recorded. And in principle, we hope to make the recording available after the event. So I guess that's it in terms of housekeeping. With this, I think we are ready to go. And let me move to our high-level opening speakers. It's my great pleasure. It's really an honor for me to welcome and thank our three opening speakers. These are Ms. Olga Algayerova, Executive Secretary from UNECE. This is His Excellency Mr. Alibek Kuantirov, who is the Vice Minister of National Economy of Kazakhstan. And this is Mr. Jocelyn Blaireau, Executive Officer from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So with this, let me move to the first one. Dear Olga, it was very much based on your vision that UNECE member states convened around a special topic for the 69th session of the Commission. And member states then decided that this special topic would be the circular economy and the sustainable use of natural resources. So very happy that you are with us here today. And Olga, thank you for joining. The floor is yours.
Many thanks, dear Elizabeth. Your Excellency, Mr. Alibek Kuantirov, Vice Minister of National Economy of the Republic of the Kazakhstan, Mr. Jocelyn Blaireau, Executive Officer from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, distinguished experts and panelists from our member states, from other UN organizations, from think tanks, and from the private sector, ladies and gentlemen. It's really, as Elizabeth mentioned, my great pleasure to open this regional policy dialogue on harnessing trade and economic cooperation to accelerate the transition towards circularity. This event marks the beginning of the United Nations Development Account Project entitled Accelerating the Transition Toward a Circular Economy in the UNECE region. My special gratitude goes to UNDP and UNEP for supporting both the project and today's session. Furthermore, I highly appreciate the collaboration with the World Circular Economy Forum, of which this dialogue is a side event. The world is using up resources at an increasingly rapid pace. By August this year, we reached so-called Earth Overshoot Day. It means the demanded ecological resources and services exceeded the amount the planet can regenerate in 1 year. So we must find effective ways to meet current needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own. The transition to a circular economy is a crucial step in this process. We need to change our resource management, our ways of production, and our consumption behavior. This not only brings much promise to Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement, but it also promotes a thriving economy that leaves no one behind. UNECE member states at their 69th Commission session acknowledged this. It was in April this year when they held a high-level political debate on the topic. The topic title was Promoting Circular Economy and Sustainable Use of Natural Resources in the UNECE region. And they, all 56, our member states, requested us to make it a special focus area for our normative work. With the existing mandates and resources, our activities shall support and guide our member states towards a more circular future. An inclusive and effective transition to circularity is not straightforward. It requires cooperation among countries, starting at the local, over the regional, and ultimately to the global level. And it is dependent interaction between the spheres of environmental, social, and economic policymakers. And UNECE is here to help address both challenges. First, given the weight of the UNECE region in global trade and resource use, progress in the UNECE region can also serve as a catalyst to greater circularity worldwide. With its 56 member states spanning a vast geographical area, the region has much to contribute. And the second, ladies and gentlemen, with our divisions covering hugely diverse areas of policymaking, starting from environment through energy to trade or transport, the organization is well placed to help countries integrate the different areas of policymaking. What is a key success factor for the circular economy transition? So I'm delighted to see that all of UNECE has taken up this challenge and is renewing efforts towards greater circularity. One example is our Economic Cooperation and Trade Division, where Elizabeth is leading it, that is already supporting countries to harness the power of the economic sphere, that is trade, innovation, and financing for the circular transition. Topics such as sustainable procurement, traceability and transparency of supply chain and waste management, including waste to energy projects, have been on top of our priority list. We are aware that every actor has its own needs and challenges when it comes to circular economy. This is the exact reason why exchange and collaboration are essential to build capacity. Only collectively we can find the common ground of developing targeted, practical solutions while avoiding systemic fragmentation. We need to identify the obstacles that await us and pool our knowledge to overcome them. The network of policymakers envisaged under the project will surely make a concrete contribution in this direction. To continue and expand our work on circular economy, I look forward to today's regional policy dialogue. Experts will showcase their circular economy activities and experiences. Sharing knowledge plays a significant role on accelerating our collective transition to a circular economy. The panel discussion will help us shape the direction of this UNECE project in a manner that best serves the needs of our member states. I'm excited to see this work unfold over the upcoming 4 years. And finally, let me remind you that today's launch event is one in a series of discussions on circularity. We have several events of the working parties and teams of specialists scheduled for the month of November that will look at how the respective work streams can contribute to a more circular economy transition. So, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, let me thank all contributors and, of course, also the UNECE staff for joining forces for this deserving cause. I look forward to a great discussion among our distinguished panelists today, and now give the floor back to our dear moderator. Thank you.
Many thanks, Olga. Many thanks for having been with us and for these remarks. And it's very much now under your leadership and your guidance that in the Secretariat will be rolling out the work in response to the Commission decision. So many thanks for that. Let me now turn to our second high-level opening speaker. And it's my great pleasure to introduce His Excellency, Mr. Alibek Kuryantyrov, Vice Minister of National Economy of the Republic of Kazakhstan. Your Excellency, you have a long career in government service. Thank you for taking the time to join us here today. We are delighted and honored to have you. We are also very excited to hear from Kazakhstan in the global trade community. Kazakhstan has a very special role these days. You will be the host, the virtual host of the 12th Ministerial Conference of the World Trade Organization, end of November. So special thanks for joining us at what must be an extremely busy time for you. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, all participants, and I'm very delighted to be a part of this event. And I wish you all success during this meeting and later. So if you don't mind, I will proceed in Russian, but then we can discuss in English. Рад приветствовать вас всех на этом важном мероприятии, в рамках которого запускается 4-летний проект Европейской экономической комиссии ООН по наращиванию потенциала для ускорения перехода к экономике замкнутого цикла в странах Центральной Азии, Южного Кавказа, Западных Балкан и Восточной Европы. Казахстан, со своей стороны, осознавая важность перехода к циркулярной экономике, приветствует деятельность комиссии, которая акцентирует свою работу в данном направлении. Основным источником национального дохода Казахстана по-прежнему остается нефть, газ и другие полезные ископаемые. Для Казахстана это, с одной стороны, вызов, с другой стороны, это возможность развивать зеленую экономику страны. Наша страна, оставаясь нефтедобывающей страной, поступательно движется в сторону инклюзивного экономического роста с одновременным сохранением природных ресурсов и снижением уровня выбросов углекислого газа. И очевидно, что реализация избранного нами курса зеленого вектора потребует значительных усилий. В целом, переход к низкоуглеродной экономике требует кардинальных структурных изменений экономики страны. И в этом контексте помощь и консультации экспертов ЕЭК ООН особенно бесценны. Будем благодарны комиссии в оказании такой поддержки. Для успешного перехода к экономике замкнутого цикла нам необходимы ключевые экономические составляющие, такие как инновации для поиска новых решений, инвестиции, в том числе через механизмы ГЧП для финансирования перехода к циркулярной экономике, предпринимательская деятельность и стимулирование малых и средних предприятий, чтобы экономика замкнутого цикла создавала возможности для бизнеса и рабочие места, конечно же. Переход к экономике замкнутого цикла – это комплексная межотраслевая задача, которая объединяет вопросы экономического сотрудничества, вопросы экологии и возможности использования торгово-экономического сотрудничества. Мы всецело поддерживаем инициативу ЕЭК ООН по продвижению темы циркулярной экономики и устойчивого использования природных ресурсов в регионе для реализации повестки 2030. Отмечаем важность применения инструментов технического содействия комиссии и в качестве поддержки заинтересованными странам в достижении их национальных целей, в частности, целей устойчивого развития ООН. Мы сейчас активно разрабатываем и совершенствуем нашу правовую базу. Так, приверженность Казахстана к переходу на зеленую экономическую модель отражена в соответствующей концепции 2013 года, концепция перехода к зеленой экономике, которая направлена на повышение эффективности использования ресурсов и конкурентоспособности, а также улучшение социальных условий. С 1 июля текущего года вступил в силу обновленный экологический кодекс, главной целью которого является определение правовых основ задач, принципов и механизмов реализации единой государственной экологической политики. В настоящее же время дорабатывается проект доктрины достижения углеродной нейтральности до 2060 года, предусматривающий базовые подходы к низкоуглеродной трансформации экологии и промышленности, с учетом насущных потребностей экономики страны, ее специфики и структуры. В рамках данной работы детально изучаются практические меры и инициативы в странах ЕС по достижению углеродной нейтральности. Хотел бы отметить, что над данным проектом доктрины мы работаем совместно и с германским агентством GIZ, мы работаем совместно с ОЭСР, совместно со Всемирным банком, с Азиатским банком развития и вообще в целом с нашими международными, с ПРООН, также с нашими международными партнерами. И, конечно же, мы хотим перенести к себе наилучшие практики. Уже сейчас очевидно, что достижение амбициозных целей доктрины потребует системных усилий, модернизации топливно-энергетического комплекса, пересмотра индустриальной и агропромышленной политики, новых подходов в ЖКХ, строительстве и в целом в образе жизни людей, а также значительных средств и инвестиций. К 2060 году доля возобновляемых и альтернативных источников энергии в нашей стране должна достигнуть более 80% от общего энергобаланса страны. И сценарий углеродной нейтральности, он предполагает активные совместные усилия государства, бизнеса и в целом общества. Его успешная реализация позволит достичь не только цели 2030 года, то есть снижение на 15% выбросов от уровня 90 года, но и нулевого баланса парниковых газов к 60 году. Также для обеспечения устойчивости использования ландшафтов при одновременной поддержке биоразнообразия утвержден национальный проект «Зеленый Казахстан», в рамках которого до конца 2025 года будет высажено 2 миллиарда деревьев на площади 500 тысяч гектар. Кроме того, данный проект предусматривает меры по снижению загрязнения воздуха, поддержке эффективного управления отходами, повышению экологического образования и повышению экологической культуры. Мы будем благодарны за любую поддержку со стороны ЕЭКООН в развитии этих экономических составляющих. И для Казахстана важно более детальное рассмотрение роли торговли в циркулярной экономике, в том числе для участия в соответствующих международных процессах. Во-первых, Казахстан возглавляет руководящий комитет по торговому потенциалу и стандартам в ЕЭКООН. Как и другие комитеты ЕЭКООН, руководящий комитет на своей следующей сессии будет рассматривать вопросы циркулярной экономики. Во-вторых, как было уже отмечено, в этом году Казахстан председательствует на 12-й министерской конференции ВТО в Женеве. Экологическая устойчивость торговли заняла центральное место при подготовке к данной МК-12, и вполне вероятно, что в этом деле важную роль играет экономика замкнутого цикла. Данная конференция отличается от предыдущих тем, что в повестке дня стоят такие острые проблемы мировой торговли, как реформирование самой организации, новые инициативы, необходимые для борьбы с пандемией, а также принятие решений по значимым переговорам, таким как вопросы регулирования субсидий на рыболовство и внутреннего регулирования торговли услугами. В-третьих, на региональном уровне Казахстан является частью СПЕКа, специальной программы ООН для экономики Центральной Азии, который принял принципы устойчивой торговли СПЕКа. Нам представится возможность обсудить работу циркулярности в торговом ключе на будущем заседании рабочей группы СПЕКа в середине ноября в Ташкенте. Мы надеемся на совместную работу с ЕЭКООН по использованию торгово-экономического сотрудничества для перехода к экономике замкнутого цикла. Уважаемые участники, позвольте поблагодарить вас за сегодняшнюю встречу и выражаю уверенность в продолжении плодотворного сотрудничества. Желаю вам крепкого здоровья, успехов в реализации стоящих перед нами целей, достижения целей устойчивого развития, а также мира, стабильности и процветания странам и народам. Спасибо большое. Thank you.
Many thanks, Excellency Vice Minister, for this very inspiring opening remarks, and also thank you for your support to the UNECE initiative. As you mentioned, like the move to a more circular green economy is a huge task, and you have given us an overview of some of the legislative and policy developments in Kazakhstan. Excited to hear about some of these areas where also UNECE is working on, PPPs, sustainable trade, SMEs, and we'll be delighted to take that forward with you. And also looking at the many different international processes, SPECA, UNECE, and WTO for this issue. So many thanks for being with us here today. Let me now move to our third high-level opening speaker, to Mr. Jos Blériot. And Jos Pilario is joining us from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. He's executive officer at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And unfortunately, Jos is not going to be here with us in person, but he has sent us a pre-recorded video. I'm very happy that we can listen to Jos today because for two reasons. On the one hand, Ellen MacArthur Foundation has really been spearheading discussions and analytical work on the circular economy. And secondly, Mr. Blériot, Jos, has been with us with UNECE over the past year on many different occasions, already on the 69th Commission session in April, in the High-Level Political Forum in New York, and at numerous events for our Textiles Traceability Project, which is a cornerstone of UNECE's work. So I'm very delighted to listen to the inspirational remarks by Jos Blériot, and if the UNDP team can help us showcase the video, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, dear colleagues, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to open this important session. The circular economy is a concept that is gaining traction around the world, and it's also a global solutions framework when it comes to tackling the double crisis of climate change and biodiversity. But in order to implement the circular economy right, we need to get the vision and the basics aligned and adopt a common language. It's about eliminating waste and pollution from the outset. It's also about circulating valuable materials and products and making sure that we don't waste any of it. And fundamentally, it's also about promoting practices that allow us to regenerate ecosystems and to build natural capital. Now we know, of course, that the circular economy has taken root and is progressing quite quickly in the European Union, but also in China, where the circular economy promotion law was adopted in 2007. It's important to acknowledge that Eastern European countries and Central Asia, also the Caucasus and even the Western Balkans, are not yet so advanced in the transition to circularity. But it is very encouraging to see the UNECE's 69th Commission session bringing in the circularity to the whole UNECE region. Bringing up that circular economy transition and allowing it to scale is also an important factor when it comes to fostering the collaboration between environment and economics. That's where we need those two to unite. And a good example of progress on that front is the current project carried out by the Economic Cooperation and Trade Division in cooperation with the UNECE Environment Division and with UNEC. This can achieve such cross-fertilization because circular economy is first and foremost an innovation and economic opportunity framework. We need to make sure absolutely that we help avoiding that circularity is seen only as an environmental issue or as a waste or materials management issue. Of course, that's a fundamental dimension of the circular economy framework, but it goes way beyond that. It involves systemic change. And it's important to note as well that the UNECE provides a platform for neutral policy dialogue, which can help avoid that fragmentation. Now, to bring out the systemic nature of the transition and to help government with a solid starting point, we at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation have created the Universal Circular Economy Policy Goals. These are not prescriptive. They are just 5 key focus areas in order to help provide a starting point for countries that want to embark on their circular economy journey. So it's about fostering the right design mechanisms for products. It's about what you put on the market, making sure that it's fit for circularity or can go back to the ecosystems. It's again about making sure we have the right collection and valorization systems in place to circulate that value. Fundamentally, it's also about making the economics work for circular economy, making sure that the incentives and the cost structure are aligned for circularity. At the moment, they favor throughput and linearity because they are inherited from the traditional industrial model. So it's really critical to understand that we cannot slap a model of circularity onto a fundamentally linear system. The economics won't stack up. The 4th goal, a policy goal that we've highlighted, is about investing in skills, infrastructure, and also research, and that really speaks for itself. And finally, the 5th one is an echo of SDG 17. It's about collaboration across value chain, across sector, across ministry. This is also important because it means that the policy dialogue is fundamental. The exchange of experience, technical assistance that is happening in UNECE and in other bodies of the United Nations is absolutely critical. To conclude, the partnerships and that collaboration is what we've always been promoting at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, working at the interface between the private and the public sector. And in this very important context, and with this distinguished assembly, allow me to reaffirm our desire to continue joining hands in the future and to collaborate with you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So also thank you to Jos for this video, and I think it was very interesting to the emphasis that circular economy is indeed an environmental topic, but it's also very much an economic topic, and that it's important to create synergies and break down the silos between these two different work streams. And I think also in today's event, we can see that we have both representatives from the economic side of governments and from the environmental side. So with this, I would like to thank all our high-level opening speakers for their insights, for their vision, and for their inspiration. We were very honored to have you with us and very much look forward to rolling out our activities together with you. So thank you very much. As we now move to our panel session, let me use that transition for two brief things. On the one hand, to say a few words about the project, which has been already mentioned by several of our speakers, the project we are launching here today, which is hosted in the Economic Cooperation Division of UNECE and is funded through the United Nations Development Account. It's the project on accelerating the transition to a circular economy in the UNECE region. I know we had a slide prepared to show to the audience with the key features of the project. So if we can pull that up, that would be wonderful. If not, we will surely circulate that information later. But maybe the key features to mention here are, it's a multi-agency capacity building project. It's aimed at supporting UNECE member states in that circular economy transition. And we'll do that amongst others with UNDP, so very happy to, with UNEP, so very happy to have UNEP with us here today. The project will run for 4 years from 2021 to 2024. And as I mentioned, it's funded through the United Nations Development Account. In terms of substance, at the outset, the project will look at 3 key themes or entry points, and many of them have already been mentioned here today. So the entry points are, on the one hand, international supply chains, and particularly the traceability of these supply chains. Secondly, innovation being crucial for the circular economy transition. And we, amongst others, look at innovation enhancing procurement. And thirdly, waste, definitely a key pillar of a circular economy transition. So here we will look at issues related to food waste, but also waste-related infrastructure, among others, through PPPs. So these are some of the key features of the project. Maybe finally to say that there are 2 key objectives. First of all, to establish a multi-stakeholder network, knowledge-sharing network, to exchange best practices. And here, many thanks to those governments who have already nominated focal points for this network, and a kind reminder to the others to please do nominate a focal point for this network. Second key objective is to conduct analysis, gap analysis, and to develop lessons learned and policy briefs for discussion at national and regional events. And I'm convinced that today's discussion will already provide us with very rich substance for these policy briefs. So with this, a brief overview about the project. Please do get in touch if you have any questions, and we look forward to rolling that out in the years to come. Now, as we move to the panel discussion, let us briefly also involve the audience. As I said, like the audience, we cannot see the audience as the speakers, and the audience cannot speak, but we have prepared a little engagement tool, Mentimeter, so that we get a feel of who is in the audience. And we have prepared 2 questions for you to engage with. For that, please do pick up your phone, go to menti.com. You can see that on the screen. And if you type in menti.com on your phone or on your tablet, you will then be asked to put in the code and that will bring you to our questions. So we prepared 2 questions for the audience. And maybe here also to tell everybody that the answers to the questions, they cannot be attributed. We only look at the aggregates. Yeah, so this is really a brainstorming of a very, very informal nature. And the first question for our audience is, which circularity aspects do you, in your work, in your research, do you focus on? So here you could give us examples, for example, different sectors. Are you looking at waste? Are you looking at food? Are you looking at energy? Or you could give us topics such as infrastructure, innovation, trade, supply chains. So as you are typing some of the answers to the...
Sorry to interrupt, sorry. People are joining, you can see on the screen, 26 people right now. And I didn't go to the first question, and I've been waiting for the people to join. We are 28 now. Should we go on or wait a little bit more? 29 people, 31 people.
Super. Let's see whether we get to 35 colleagues who joined the Mentimeter exercise. We are at 32, 33. Let's go to the question.
Okay.
Thank you to you, NDP colleagues. So you will move us to that question, I guess. Great. Now, so here we are looking at what's the circularity aspect our audience, our 35 participants who are joining us through Mentimeter are looking at. Let's see whether they are looking more at waste, at food, at energy, at procurement. We can already see what type of policy making topics are coming up. Plastic, indeed, is a very important one. Innovation, trade, waste coming up quite a bit. Plant biomass. So we see there is really like a diversity in terms of answers. The answers are trickling in. I do see a lot of waste, and I think that's clearly something that waste has been at the origin of much of the circular economy transition. But there are many other new topics as well. Somewhere I saw tourism, a very interesting one we haven't yet looked at. We can see agriculture, value chains. Very important to look also at urban issues. And here I see 2 also very crucial topics, taking a holistic view, namely to really look at the intersection of the different topics. And as we heard in the opening, circular economy, for doing a circular economy transition, we have to maybe break the silos. Some more sectors were coming up before, also textiles, very important topic for UNECE. We do have a project on textiles traceabilities and value chain. And the role of standards as a normative entity with lots of standard setting in UNECE. Clearly, the general aspects such as standards are an area of work for us. Great, so I think we have an overview of what our audience is interested in. Thank you everybody for engaging. Now let's move to the second question. And second question is a little bit, brings us to our speakers, because in our session here today, we have representatives from government. We have also representatives from business, private sector, from think tanks, from international organizations. And the question to our audience is, who do you think can drive the circular economy transition? And you can sort of like engage by moving the scale on this diagram. Yeah? So you can give different ranks, and we see this already moving. So very interesting. Governments, businesses, and consumers are seen as those driving circularity. There's also a role for international organizations, of course. At the moment, business is leading with 44 answers. So I'm very happy that we do have a business representative here with us today, and it's maybe a call for us to really ensure that throughout the project we do engage with business community, and obviously governments also have a very important role to play. Great to see that consumers are also coming up, because ultimately it's the choice of consumers, what they buy and what characteristics of products they look for. And clearly, I would say think tanks also help us chart the way forward and find the right solutions. Wonderful. So thank you for engaging. We do have an overview now what our audience is interested in, where they see potential for change, where they see like potential for like driving the move to a circular economy transition. So with that, we finally move to the panel. We start with the panel of government representatives. And here, let me welcome our speakers. We have 3 speakers lined up with us. And let me introduce the lady first and then the 2 gentlemen. I'm very delighted to have with us Irma Gurguliani. Irma, you're the Deputy Head for Waste and Chemicals Management Department in Georgia, in the Environment Ministry, if I understand correctly. We also have with us 2 gentlemen, Mr. Alexander Yurkariev, who is the head of the UN Division, Department of Multilateral Economic Cooperation and Special Projects, Ministry of Economic Development in the Russian Federation. And we have with us Mr. William Neal, who is the advisor for circular economy in the Directorate General for Environment, the Circular Economy and Green Growth Department at the European Commission. So many thanks for the 3 of you for joining us for this first part of the panel discussion. And let's engage by looking at some specific questions. And maybe allow me here to start with William from the European Commission. And William, you have been really working on circular economy for quite some time, and you have many years of experience in engaging on circularity in the European Commission. Could you elaborate for us a little bit on the evolution of the circular economy concept? How has it evolved in the European Union? What are maybe some best practices that also countries with economies in transition could be resorting to? So thank you for joining us, and William, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and good morning, distinguished guests and your excellencies. Yes, I'm incredibly busy at the moment. We're all very busy because circular economy is now very much at the center of the European Green Deal, and the European Green Deal, as President von der Leyen has said, is really our growth strategy. And since the pandemic, it's turned from our growth strategy also to our recovery strategy. So we're really at the center of the policy, of the wider policy agenda. But that's not always been the case. I mean, it's quite recent. It's only in the last 10 years, I would say. If you look at the history of environment policy at the European level, it sort of evolved from the 1970s after a series of disasters. And then we had 20 years of regulation. We had 200 regulations in 20 years, very regulatory approach. And then environment became an objective under the European Union treaties in 1986. Sustainable development became an objective of the European Union in 1992 or 1993. But it wasn't until about 10 years ago that we started taking this very economic approach. We were still very much on this rather legislative approach to environment. And this, I think, was partly in response to what was going on globally, which is the great acceleration in consumption of natural resources and the pressures that put us under. But also it was a very human element. It was because we had an economist who came in as the Environment Commissioner and said, hold on, isn't it better to avoid the pollution rather than punishing the polluters, by coming in with laws and targets. And that commissioner was Yanis Potocnik, who of course is now the co-chair of the UN International Resource Panel. And I had the honor to be in his private office at the time. So this was about 10 years ago. And we talked to Jos Blériot, we talked to many industry leaders. And I have to say it was tough. It was very challenging to convince particularly the commissioners and the civil servants that there isn't a trade-off between environmental protection and competitiveness, that you can actually generate growth. And as Jos said earlier on, it's not environment policy, it's economic and industrial policy as well. And I think essential to making us, or to getting us where we are today, was the joint leadership that we have now between the Industry and Enterprise Directorate General in the European Commission and the Environment Directorate General. It is really officially and in practice a joint leadership, and we have the Vice President of the Commission who is responsible. So it is really integrating those policy areas. So as I said, we've really, I think that's been absolutely fundamental to getting to where we are today. And I remember going to see the Industry Commissioner 10 years ago with the Environment Commissioner and explaining, how resource efficiency makes sense economically. And of course, he agreed, but there was no ownership there. There was no sort of joint responsibility, and it's taken a while to get there. I think the battle isn't won yet. In many of the member states, the 27 member states, even the ones that have a sort of a strategy for circular economy, it's still very often seen that circular economy is about recycling, and that is a compliance problem for the environment minister, and nobody else should worry about it. When actually the part of the answer to our waste problems is in avoiding waste and making the economy work better upstream. And of course, we have resource efficiency, and we have making products last longer and using them better, using resources better in the economy. But we still have that problem very much at the national level. And we've seen it very much recently when we asked member states to come up with recovery and stimulus packages, and we asked them to incorporate sustainability and circular economy into that. And it was very difficult. It was to actually come up with circular approaches to building renovation or to rolling out electric vehicle infrastructure, all of these things. People in the ministries responsible weren't necessarily aware of how you could do that in a circular way. But I think just to summarize, I mean, at the moment, as we are in our current circular economy action plan, I'd say that there are two really important things about it which are worth mentioning. One is this sort of systemic approach, because with our plastic strategy in 2018, we already said that, we can't just take a regulatory approach. We need to use all of our policy tools and involve all of the stakeholders. And now we will roll out a textile strategy in, I think, early next year, an electronic strategy in spring next year, and then a construction product strategy. And I would say this, and that's really sort of coherent, looking at all of the tools and taking a very balanced approach. It's not just sort of a package of things thrown together. It's really a strategic approach to those key value chains. Of course, those key value chains are very international as well, so we have to take into account the trade aspect and so on. And the second thing, which is really groundbreaking, is that we are now using product policy. So we have 450 million consumers in Europe. Using that collective consumer power, we have at European level the competence to define what is allowed on our markets. And we're expanding the eco-design directive, which so far has only been directed at energy efficiency of energy using products, to all products, and with a whole series of criteria. So that will be the threshold for products being allowed on the European market. There will be physical requirements related to circularity, repairability, durability, all of these things. And not only that, and I'll end here because we have other speakers. The other thing, which I mean I can come back to later if we have time, is not only physical attributes but data attributes. So we're looking at, and we are proposing, I'm actually working now on the legal proposal for requirements for access to data on products, and requirements for having a scannable identifier on every product. So the idea is that products on the European market would have to have a scannable, it could be a QR code or barcode, but then giving access to important data to enable circularity. I can say a bit more about that later, but I don't want to take too much of your time. Thank you.
Many thanks, William. Surely there are lots of things to share. Interesting that circular economy has really been on the agenda for 10 years, you said, in the European Commission, and you've produced some 200 regulations. So this is like really massive, and it shows the amount of regulatory work. Let me also highlight 2 or 3 other things I found particularly interesting. On the one hand, that question, or like the argument saying there is no trade-off between environmental protection and economic opportunities. And I think that's really sort of like one of the core issues for discussion. Or secondly, as you said, like the importance of joint leadership between industry and economic side and the environmental side, and the need for a balanced approach. And at the end, you also talked a little bit about the product regulation, and I think that brings us rightly to the trade-related questions, the questions about market access, and I think that are definitely important things to look at in the future. And last but not least, the role of digitalization. How can we use digitalization in all of this? So lots of food for thought. With that, let us move to our speaker from the Russian Federation, great pleasure for me to introduce Alexander. Alexander, you're heading the UN division at the Department on Multilateral Economic Cooperation. Thank you for being with us. And as we've heard, like UNECE, in UNECE, we give a lot of importance to circular economy now. And we're really interested in hearing what you can tell us about the Russian Federation approach to this relatively new area of policymaking. The floor is yours, Alexander.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, distinguished speakers and audience. With your permission, I will proceed with my remarks. Fortunately, this time I will deliver in Russian, but rest assured that next time I will deliver in English with all technical vocabulary in my mind. Комиссия сделала большую работу в этом году, особенно в контексте подготовки к 69-й сессии. Мои коллеги в этом году уже не раз презентовали наши подходы в отношении концепции циркулярной экономики, в том числе как раз на сессии комиссии в апреле и заседании Комитета по инновациям в июне. Сегодня я постараюсь еще раз систематизировать нашу позицию и также поделюсь наиболее актуальной информацией о циркулярной экономике в Российской Федерации. Циркулярная экономика – это, конечно, многогранная тема, и она, конечно, представляет для нас большой интерес. Она имеет не только сугубо экологическую логику, но также логику экономическую. Об этом мы уже сказали, об этом сказал представитель Европейской комиссии и представитель секретариата комиссии. Для нас, для Российской Федерации, циркулярная экономика – это прежде всего набор решений, в том числе экономических, которые позволяют продлить жизнь ресурсам и материалам, более устойчиво обращаться с отходами, культивировать более ответственные, осознанные модели производства и потребления, также стимулировать инновационные бизнес-модели, в том числе те, которые основаны на использовании прорывных цифровых технологий и анализе больших данных. Российские подходы уже нашли отражение в документах нацпланирования на самых различных уровнях. В этом месяце циркулярная экономика также обрела статус одной из стратегических инициатив правительства. Для нас это сигнал, прежде всего, о растущем интересе к этой концепции в Российской Федерации. Коротко освещу некоторые наши успехи и планы по развитию циркулярной экономики на национальном уровне. Во-первых, это обращение с бытовыми отходами и их утилизация. Президентом поставлена задача к 2030 году обеспечить 100% сортировку твердых коммунальных отходов. И несмотря на сложные условия, которые перед нами стоят в связи с восстановлением экономики от пандемии, мы продолжаем создавать необходимую инфраструктуру и мощность для этого. Уже введены в эксплуатацию мощности по обработке и по утилизации. По обработке 10 миллионов тонн, а по утилизации 3 миллиона тонн. Всего в прошлом и этом году к вводу в эксплуатацию мы планируем 39 объектов. Во-вторых, важно стимулировать развитие рынка вторичных ресурсов, в том числе перерабатываемого пластика. В декабре прошлого года правительство утвердило концепцию расширенной ответственности производителей товаров и упаковки. Этот документ определяет новые правила. Они призваны мотивировать бизнес инвестировать больше в инфраструктуру, сборы и переработки отходов с тем, что в дальнейшем возвращать вторсырье в оборот. В планах у нас также законодательно закрепить требования по количеству вторсырья, которое должно использоваться при производстве товаров упаковки, а также в дальнейшем утвердить перечень товаров, которые можно будет производить с использованием вторсырья. Кроме того, в планах внедрить стимулирующие меры для производства готовой продукции из ПЭТ с обязательным использованием вторсырья. Вот в том числе в апреле этого года принято решение обеспечить господдержку производителям биополимеров и биоразлагаемого пластика. Ну и напоследок по этой теме в разработке национальные стандарты для продукции и материалов содержания вторсырья из полимерных отходов. Третьим, не менее важным направлением для нас является стимулирование бизнеса к переходу на более экологичное производство, а значит внедрение более чистых технологий в промышленность. Тут ведется работа по переходу промышленных предприятий на принципы наилучших доступных технологий. Такие технологии призваны обеспечить внедрение ресурсосберегающих, безотходных технологий и обеспечить поэтапную модернизацию предприятий. В ближайшие годы мы планируем провести модернизацию производства порядка 480 наиболее загрязняющих предприятий. В этой же связи мы совершенствуем систему госзакупок, делаем ее так, чтобы она была акцентирована на зеленые закупки. Уже сейчас законом регулируются закупки с дополнительными экологическими требованиями. И еще один важный момент нашей работы, о котором нельзя не упомянуть, это экологическое просвещение населения. Мы стремимся вовлекать население в раздельный сбор отходов, а также культивировать осознанное потребление с тем, чтобы в дальнейшем минимизировать образование отходов. Такая работа у нас ведется на местах, и именно на местах она наиболее эффективна, в том числе она ведется у нас на уровне регионов. Подытожу ответ на вопрос. Мы понимаем важность перехода к циркулярной экономике на национальном уровне. Для нас эта концепция имеет несколько измерений, не только экологическое, но и экономическое. В России уже многое сделано в этой связи, и многое еще планируется сделать. Закрепление вот этой вот повестки циркулярной экономики как стратегического приоритета для нас означает возможность активизации нашей работы по этой теме в будущем. Спасибо.
Many thanks, Alexander, for sharing these thoughts, and it's very encouraging and great to hear that circular economy is now amongst the strategic priorities of the Russian Federation as well. And you've shared with us already some key successes, definitely in the area of waste infrastructure you mentioned. You talked quite a bit about plastic, and I think that's really a topic that has come to the forefront also of the international debate, also here in Geneva and including on trade-related issues. Very interesting what you mentioned in terms of saying support to business for using cleaner technologies, and also the use of green procurement as a policy tool. So I think these are all very interesting insights, together with the combination of looking at it at the local level and at the regional level, so the different entry points here. So many thanks for sharing that, and also for highlighting sort of the dual approach, environmental, ecological, and economics. I think that was very, very good contribution and interesting for our discussion. Having heard about waste, let us now move to Irma. Irma, you're joining us from Georgia, and Georgian government has been working quite a lot also in the direction of the circular economy for some years. And I think you have also quite some extensive experience on waste management and achieved some successes there. So please, if you can share with us your progress, your experiences on that important issue. The floor is yours, Irma.
Thank you. I'm very delighted to be with you and discuss all those issues which raise the circular economy issues and waste for sure. I would like to mention that regarding the waste management, actually, it was like early in 2012, actually, we started with EU support. There was the twinning project, actually, and all the obligations which comes from EU association agreement regarding the waste management. So we tried, it was really big beginning for us. I mean, finally in 2015 there was elaborated and accepted by the government and by the parliament the first law on waste management code. Actually, it was the first law through 20 years. I mean, we did not have anything before that. So after that, actually, last 6 years already, we have developed more than about 20 bylaws or acts, actually. So what's most important, even in 2016, when we started elaboration of the waste management strategy, 15 years of strategy and 5 years of action plan, even with support of EU colleagues, I mean, EU experts, they said that we are very ambitious. I mean, you cannot do that. So in 5 years, actually, of course, 80%, we already assessed our action plan, what we did in last 5 years. So, and it seems like 80% is already done, or at least we started many of them. So, and I should mention that at that time, even from the governmental budget, there was nothing put in there. So most of actions we did with support of donors, with support of EU or other spread countries like SIDA, Swedish government, USAID, and many others. I mean, And what's most important, we worked quite a lot in the municipalities, I mean, at national level for sure. But right now, what's most important, and especially with regard of circular economy, what's most important for us right now, and we are going to implement EPR obligations. So extended producer responsibility, we approved 4 bylaws just last year, even before starting the pandemic, but implementation, of course, we postponed somehow because of this situation. So, and there is 4 streams: electronics, batteries and vehicles, ELVs, tires. So 4 bylaws we already start right now, and 2 packaging and the ELVs, we are pretty sure that we will follow. So that actually, all those issues pushed up somehow to start thinking about the drafting of the strategy of circular economy as well. So right now we already have the governmental, group, and actually circular economy strategy, even now what we are working on with support of Swedish government, actually with SIDA. So we are creating somehow good panels, working to raise the awareness. And what is most important to achieve those successes, even in waste management or even with the regulation of EPR, it was not so easy, I would say, to somehow convince producers like, hi, we are here, and all the actions what we put it, or even by law since the beginning, they were involved in the processes. So NGOs were involved always. So we had quite big discussions, and the government was very open, especially our ministry, because we leaded all these processes, and with support of EU, we did quite a lot, and experience sharing, what was most important for us, and good thing, what is for our EPR, and we strongly believe that it will be run by the producers, by private sectors, and they are sure that government will just look and monitor the situation. So of course, it's not really easy, especially during this economic situation what we are having now. So it's very difficult, but cooperation again, and feeling the situation and looking the perspectives from the producers, from private, businesses, that really helps us as a government to move on, to start thinking always and use the sharing of experiences from others, how to start, how to work, even how to share information to each of the producers or consumers or whatever. So during the last 5 years, when the legislation is already on place regarding the waste, I would mention, so the private sector waking up somehow, and what's most important also that we already have more than 20 maybe recycling businesses. They started during last 6 years, so they know they don't afraid right now. What's most important, especially when we have this, according to legislation, we put it this 15 years of strategy on waste management, 5 years. Now we are moving to another 5 years action plan, which will be elaborated very soon. That's also under EU for Environment project. So we are working on, and what's most important, that at local level also, all of the municipalities, they have their own waste management plans as well, municipal waste management plans, and they are elaborating by themselves. Of course, we are supporting them with the projects, under the projects, and what's most important, that each of the private business, they are obliged to have the company waste management plans. They are submitting to the ministry, we are approving, and the process is going on, like to think about the waste management hierarchy in each of the companies. So they are working to identify their own problems, work on that, and they are updating in every 3 years or in every 1 year. So what's most important also, the government, what we have right now under the Produce of Georgia, they're supporting recycling businesses, etc. So maybe it's not that much, but step by step, I would say we really see the progress, and we will be very happy to share our experiences and get more expertise and knowledge from you, the countries who already reached very good recycling targets, what we are going to reach in 2023, according to our legislation. And yeah, we are ready to work with all the stakeholders, of course. The best is to sit together, work with producers and private sectors, and develop and think about more public-private partnership at municipal level, at local level. So that would be very helpful, especially now when we are at UNECE level. Of course, we work with the BRS Secretariat as well, according to the waste, but anyway, it's very important also to think more broadly. And for circular economy development strategy, we already had established the basis, I would say. It's the Intergovernmental Commission, but what's most important, NGOs are involved. And the even project right now, what we are talking about, to elaborate some pillars for circular economy strategy, actually, that is based in NGOs and working with us, with the government. So we have to be very open. I mean, what's most important? Government, NGOs, publics, and yeah, I mean, thank you.
Many thanks, Irma, for sharing that, and congratulations. You said like you've achieved sort of like 80% of that action plan, so yeah. Well done. It's been like maybe a long process, and surely lots of interesting things to share also in terms of recycling business and waste hierarchy and so forth. Let me maybe pick 2 or 3 things that struck my attention particularly. Now, as you're moving to the circular economy strategy, really that importance of keeping business involved, and I think as we today talk about the economic side of things, that's maybe one of the key takeaway messages, and that definitely matters a lot when we get to the extended producer responsibility type of issues. So that would be one. And secondly, you mentioned that at the beginning, the importance of support and also of donors, because it's a huge task. It requires huge investments in infrastructure, but also a lot of time of the government officials, all these processes of developing the regulatory framework, money for the enterprises to adjust. So let's put that issue of the need for support, the need for donor engagements, and the role of international organizations also a little bit on our agenda. So with that, we do have a moment to do a second round of questions. And I think here I'd really like to focus it a little bit on the trade and on the international exchange dimension. And let me again follow the same sequencing, and let's start with William, or let's get started with William. You've mentioned already like the importance of trade, and trade between the EU and neighboring countries is an important policy area, and also for the circular economy transition. So what do you see coming here? What are some things up on the radar screen from the EU perspective? What are the important things we need to know?
Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth. And I have to sympathize with what Irma was saying. Sorry, I just wanted to react a little bit, because I think in the European Union member states, we're still struggling in so many. We have high performers and low performers, and we're trying to learn between the member states about waste management. And there are two lessons that I've learned, because I've been to many seminars where we've got civil servants together to talk about a good practice and so on. 2 things which I found have been the most important. Okay, legislation has to be there, but one is the economic incentives. And I've seen very good examples of progressive landfill charging, for example, progressive and predictable, so that over 10 years people move towards recycling. And secondly, separate collection, because I remember meeting 2 mayors of 2 cities, one Italian, one Swedish, within a week of each other. The Italian mayor said, "We have a big problem. We've got 10 years of mixed waste standing, and we haven't got the incineration capacity, and all we can do is burn it, and it has no value." And a week later, we spoke to a mayor of a Swedish city who said, "We have a waste problem. People keep stealing it, because once it's separated, you've got separated glass, aluminium, steel, whatever, then it has a value." So I think separate collection is essential to getting the private sector interested in investing in the recycling capacity. But I'm diverging away from your question, Elizabeth. So what I would say, actually, I heard somebody say about a week ago, there's no point in developing sustainability islands. And I thought that was quite a good way of putting it. I think that's why UNECE's work here is so important in bringing together all of these examples and working on the trade and economic aspects of circularity. Our key value chains, including the ones which I mentioned earlier, they are global. If you maybe construction materials a little bit less, but certainly things like textiles and electronics. I mean, the textiles and electronics we're consuming in Europe are to a fairly large proportion produced in other parts of the world. And circularity is by definition a systemic approach. It needs to involve all parts of the loop. So it has to bridge those split incentives that you have across those value chains. It has to involve all of the stakeholders, and that means reaching out globally, and it has to tackle barriers which can be in trade, and it has to deal with some barriers that might be perceived as coming in, which of course we have to deal with through trade rules also. Our sustainable development has been at the heart of European trade policy, I would say, since, again, about 10 years. 2011, we had the free trade agreement with Korea, which I think was the first one which had a separate chapter on sustainable development. And now we have these chapters in all of our free trade agreements, many aspects of them relevant to the circular economy. For example, dealing with eco-labeling, trade and investment in environmental goods, and waste management, of course. And we're committed also, the Commission, to propose specific energy and raw materials chapters in future free trade agreements. I think that transition to circular economy at a global level really has to depend, as was said earlier, also on standards to promote circular business models and goods and technologies and services. Of course, the formal standard setting procedures, but also soft standards. I think industry standards in terms of measurement and so on can have a very important impact. And we also need a regulatory dialogue and cooperation to help us to ensure that we reach those common standards. I think I would suggest I'm going to talk a little bit more maybe about the digital product passport, because I think that's interesting from a perspective of transparency in international trade and circularity. But just to say before that, if anybody is interested in learning more about the global aspects of circular economy from the European perspective, in 2020 we produced a staff working document as part of our circular economy action plan, which sets out the trade aspects and many other aspects. So I won't go into that now because it's quite it will be here all day. Just to mention one thing which I think is very interesting for people is because it's very new, and that is our initiative to build a global alliance on circular economy and resource efficiency. The first high-level meeting of that was last month, and we all already, along with the European Union member states, we have Canada, India, Japan, Kenya, South Africa, Korea, Rwanda, Norway, Nigeria, Morocco, Colombia, and Chile. So, and that's expanding. And of course, we're also working with UN Environment Programme and UNIDO. We have as strategic partners the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, so Joss's organization, PACE, and the World Circular Economy Forum. So it's really bringing together a lot of global partners and a lot of national governments globally in different parts of the world. So I would say watch this space. It'd be very interesting to see what happens in that context, and to link that, of course, with your work in UNECE. But just to say a little bit on a more specific element which I raised earlier, which is this idea of a European Union digital product passport. As I said, this is part of the Sustainable Products Initiative, which we will adopt in spring next year. This is what I was explaining, where we are using the Eco-Design Directive to establish minimum requirements for products put on the European market. And as I explained, part of that will be a digital product passport, where there will be requirements in terms of data accessibility. We have the technology now to track and trace products. It's been happening for decades, for logistics, for inventory control, for marketing, and so on. And in the last 10 years or so, the amount of data that can be managed has grown exponentially. And when we talk about circular economy, we talk about value retention. And so much of the value of products on the market now is in the data which is attached to them. But so much of that data is lost. So the data is somewhere, but it isn't accessible to the person that can use it to retain, to sort of have those value retaining actions on the product. So if you're a repairer or a remanufacturer, you need to know where the spares are available. You need to know if you're a recycler, if there are hazardous substances or valuable substances in the product. So really, in terms of closing loops, in terms of value retention of products, if you lose that data, you lose the potential to prolong the life of the product and to use it more intensively and more optimally. Now, of course, the international aspect of this is that many of the companies that we will be asking to attach data to their products will not be in the European Union, but they will have to provide that to put their product on the European Union market. And we're talking about minimum requirements. It's really at the lowest threshold. We're not talking about, you know, making top runner approach where we're looking for, you know, for very ambitious things. It's really about identifying which data is really important. So things like hazardous substances, it's important that we know that they're in the product. So we will certainly need to make sure that the upstream actors, the upstream stakeholders are at the table and discussing this with us. It's very important that we have in that data also not only data from the final manufacturer, but upstream data in terms of the materials and the components going into products also. So this is going to be a medium-term project. We will adopt the law in spring of next year, but it will be a process where product group by product group over the next decades, we will establish what those data requirements are. And the first, I think, will be on electric vehicle batteries. We adopted already a batteries regulation at the end of last year with an obligation to have an identifier, an electronic tag, if you like, on each battery, and a series of B2B, B2C, and B2G, so business to business, business to consumer, and business to government data requirements. Some of them are on an open basis, for example, consumer information, but some of them very much encrypted or especially if they're relating to intellectual property and so on between businesses, they're not open. So that is what we're working on. And as I say, it will have important implications and important potential for increasing global circularity and enabling that data to travel with those products on their journey from the producer to the consumer and to the waste and hopefully back into the loop.
Thank you, William. Very interesting. So now we're really zooming into trade and supply chain questions. And on the one hand, you alerted that it's interesting to look maybe at some of the FTAs and also look at the questions related to trade barriers and the role of what standards can play in this regard. So that's, I would say, one stream of thought and work. And the second, the role of digitalization. And here maybe just to flag to the audience that on the 10th of November, we are having the first session of our team of specialists on supply chain traceability. Yeah? So that's a work stream that has already been ongoing in UNECE, particularly for fish and for textiles, but now we will look at supply chain traceability and digitalization in some other sectors as well. So thank you for that. I realize we have a little bit of a timing challenge, but let me give also follow-up comments to our two other speakers. And here I realize in my script that we changed the order a little bit. So we have the lady now, and Irma, if you have some additional thoughts to share, maybe in terms of financing, if we stay with the economic questions, is there something you would like to add in terms of the importance of financing approaches for all of this?
Yeah, that's very important, of course. Even Mr. William mentioned the separation at source, so from which we actually the EPR might be supported, I mean, at municipal level. And that's obligation also each of the municipalities. I mean, they had to start, for example, according to Georgian legislation in 2019. So, but the funds actually, unfortunately, no, I mean, they are not from the budget that much, which will fully cover this option. I mean, and without separation, of course, we will not have the good quality of waste, which might be recycled. So that's why all this change to keep in mind. So that's really very problematic. Even we are, of course, trying somehow to allocate something, but it's not enough. I mean, that's why, and even to convince the producers, like you have to start with this and you will have the good quality of waste, like for recycling. I mean, especially when it comes to the packaging or plastic or whatever. I mean, that's a huge issue. I mean, and to create this kind of even bodies, like to think about that, to support, to provide advice to the private sector, actually, how to build or to prepare the investing the project, I mean, and to go to the bank or whatever. I mean, there should be some supporting team, like to share experience and support the private sector somehow, how to move on. I mean, maybe sometimes they can finance themselves, but I mean, there should be something supporting to invest, I mean, in waste management, to keep everything waste hierarchy to be implemented, which will support, of course, the circular economy and even production. When it comes to the production, design of products, I mean, standard should be there. So that's why in this regard, we have to highlight some of the issues which for the beginning, especially should be on place even if the government thinks about the circular economy progress.
Thank you, Irma. So clearly, we do need to look at financing and support for the private sector. Public-private partnerships could be one option. There are maybe other options about innovative financing and how to channel investment into that direction. Technology transfer and how to foster the role of innovation, definitely. Great. Now, let us turn to Alex. And Alex, how do you now see all the role of these economic issues in the circular economy transition? Are there any thoughts you would like to share with us, and maybe also any thoughts about what we at the UN can do, and what's your thought?
Да, спасибо за вопрос. Конечно, большую роль в процессе перехода к циркулярным принципам, к принципам циркулярной экономики отводится государству. Но основным игроком все-таки должен быть бизнес, и даже наш маленький опрос, 40 участников, показал, что это уже почти мейнстримное мнение о том, что бизнес должен быть во главе этого процесса. Однако, несмотря на те усилия, которые уже предприняты, международные исследования показывают, что сейчас достаточно низкий уровень проникновения циркулярных бизнес-моделей на рынке. Их доля в среднем составляет порядка 50%. Мы видим, что данный показатель объясняется, прежде всего, не в полной мере сформированной системой стимулов для бизнеса. Компании по-прежнему предпочитают работать в линейном сегменте экономики, ориентируются на извлечение прибыли в краткосрочной перспективе, и их можно понять. Среди других важных препятствий низкий уровень информированности и навыков у компаний, недостаток потребительского спроса, дело в измерении циркулярной экономики, отставание регуляторики от прогресса, развития циркулярной экономики, отсутствие доступа к финансированию, к технологиям, к данным, о чем говорил как раз Уильям, о жизненном цикле продукции, о производственных процессах. При этом весьма вероятна ситуация, в которой будут возникать торговые барьеры в отношении продукции циркулярной экономики. Это будет связано с тем, что на данный момент база международных стандартов в этой области довольно ограниченная. И с другой стороны, так как формируются различные национальные подходы и стандарты на национальном уровне, например, как и маркировки, как и сертификации, а также к финансированию тех или иных зеленых проектов, эта ситуация будет с каждым годом обостряться, если мы не предпримем какие-то действия на международном уровне. И в этой связи нам важно активизировать наши совместные усилия для информационного обмена, сбора данных и кодов по измерению циркулярной экономики, гармонизации наших стандартов и процедур верификации этих стандартов, совершенствованию таксономии и классификации продукции циркулярной экономики, ну а также выработки рамочных рекомендаций и руководящих принципов по самым различным аспектам внедрения принципов циркулярной экономики. Вот полагаю, что именно в этих направлениях нам нужно двигаться в рамках международных организаций, в том числе в рамках Европейской экономической комиссии ООН. Надеюсь, что новый проект сможет адресовать какие-то из этих вопросов, а мы со своей стороны будем продолжать делиться российским опытом. Спасибо.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I guess also here we've heard really the importance of support, the important role of the private sector, yeah. And I guess our eyes will be turning to Ardita in the next session, speaking for ICC, International Chamber of Commerce. And Alex, you've also mentioned like the challenge of how to increase the market share and the importance of avoiding trade barriers in this regard. So I think that's really an important element for us on the trade side of things, including the role international standards can play. And here, let me alert you all that our Working Party 6 on regulatory cooperation will also be looking at circular economy. That's mid-November. So I hope that we can pick up in that segment on the debate we had here today. And very interesting also what you mentioned about the key principles that should shape sort of like our way forward. So with that, many thanks to all our speakers for this panel. Greatly appreciated it. I realized I created a little bit a timing challenge, but I think we've had such a rich discussion that I'm really delighted, and I look forward to working with all of you in terms of how we continue that exchange. If we now move to the second segment, here we are looking at many different other stakeholders who have already been mentioned. We've talked about the role of international organizations. We've talked the role of think tanks. We've talked about the role of private sector. And it's my great pleasure to introduce like 3 speakers from these backgrounds. And more particularly, Mr. Jorge Laguna Celis, who is the head of the One Planet Network Secretariat at UNEC. Welcome, Jorge, and we've worked together with the One Planet Network in the past, and it's great to have UNEC being part also of the UNDA project that we are launching here today. Secondly, Ms. Ardita Seknai, Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce, ICC, in Albania. Ardita, great to see you again. You've also joined us on some earlier occasions, and as you heard, we are all really very keen on hearing what we can do to support the private sector in this transition. And thirdly, Mr. Petar Usokovic. He's the Dean of the Faculty of Technology and Metallurgy at the University of Belgrade. So coming from the academic side, but Petar, I understand you've been very much involved also in policy making and in the circular economy transition in Serbia. So welcome to all 3 of you. Let me now start with maybe UNEP. And Jorge, question to you, that you have been cooperating partner of UNECE, you're representing the One Planet Network. Can you give us some insights and talk maybe about the ambitions also of the One Planet Network and the role of cooperation and partnership in the circular economy transition, and provide us your views and insights. And I just have to remind us all of the timing challenge, so we have to be a little bit focused. But Jorge, the floor is yours, and thank you for being with us.
No, absolutely, Elizabeth. And I want to really appreciate the UNECE for providing this great platform, which we see it as extremely useful to promote this all of government approach towards the circular economy. I am pleased to come here today in my capacity as head of the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production and the One Planet Network, which is its implementing tool. The 10-year framework of programs, it is a very basic agreement, a very important agreement that was achieved in 2012, and it is the only United Nations global framework adopted by 193 member states that presents the basis for promoting a sustainable transition towards an economy that is circular. In 2012, we did not spoke about circular economy, but we use other terms such as sustainable consumption and production. By now, it has become widely clear that circular economy is a sustainable economic model that promotes the achievement of sustainable consumption and production patterns. We are therefore all speaking the same language. Secondly, member states, as you all have agreed, have adopted the Sustainable Development Goals and have put, then again, circular economy and sustainable consumption and production at the heart of SDG 8 on employment and SDG 12 on responsible consumption and production. We are therefore today looking at ways of accelerating the implementation of Agenda 2030. We are extremely pleased, and we have already seen how important and how critical it is to base our decisions in strategies and science. Circularity, as a matter of fact, and we have heard it today, it's a fundamental dimension of sustainable consumption and production. What the One Planet Network is doing, and it's supporting countries in the UNECE region, it's to help countries make that connection amongst the stakeholders that are active in our different programs in implementing sustainable development goals. The network is comprised of 3 sectoral programs, and we have seen the areas that are being addressed in the Mentimeter today. They are extremely relevant to us around food systems, buildings and constructions, and tourism, which implement systemic and circular solutions at the sectoral level. We also have 3 thematic programs, and these I will spend a little bit of time later on in the discussion highlighting them, but for now I will just mention them. These are around consumer information, sustainable lifestyles and education, and sustainable public procurement. So these 6 areas that range from food, buildings and constructions, and tourism, to also addressing key areas that we have discussed here, from consumer information, sustainable lifestyles, education, and sustainable public procurement, are what we believe are the major levers and catalyzers for the introduction of circular solutions in our economies. Each of these 6 priority areas, we work through experts, and we have a number of programs that are active, creating normative tools, frameworks, areas, and solutions that can help countries of the UNECE embed a circular economy approach. In addition, perhaps many of you are familiar that we have over 140 national focal points that are working in the ministries of environment or of natural resources in advancing a circular economy or a sustainable consumption and production approach. The challenge that we face, and that is why we are extremely pleased of the event that we are launching today, it is to bring the environmental with the economic dimension together. And the stakeholders that are working from an economic perspective to the stakeholders that are also working from an environmental or from a social perspective. Because this is not an issue that belongs to only one single ministry. It requires overarching guidance and political commitment. And we are extremely pleased to hear the political messages today of countries that are advancing in that single government approach and with that political vision to move forward. We at the One Planet Network believe that governments have the primary responsibility to create the enabling conditions to allow their societies to move towards a more circular economy approach, but this cannot be fully achieved without the full participation of the private sector. So what we're seeing today, that is the launch of the network of policymakers, it is an extremely vital opportunity to deepen our engagement at the country level by complementing this network of policymakers with the national focal points that are already working in the region. So I will just mention one point here because I think it's important that we can have this dialogue. And it is really how can we work in the UNECE region by identifying specific priorities. And I think that we have heard within this project that there are a number of areas where we seem to have a common understanding. The issue of labeling standards and the role of private sector that we have in offering adequate consumer information that does not hinder trade, that actually facilitates it, it's a game changer for the region. The creation of strategies that are based in value chain approaches that are working and producing value. And we heard today at the opening of this session the example of Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is a great champion in this and has been working for a number of years. How can we replicate those experiences? and working in countries like in Russia that are making tremendous policy strides at the national level. How can we bring those experiences to countries that are neighboring and are wishing to replicate these good policy examples, this initiative? So we're extremely happy to be here. We're at your service to partner in this great project that you're launching today, and we look forward in engaging in its implementation. Thank you.
Many thanks, Jorge, for these remarks and for really bringing the perspective also of the global UN framework, UNEP, to this debate here today. And quite interesting how you traced it back to 2012, yeah, and then 2015 with the SDGs. So circular economy has been around, maybe with different terminology, but in the end, we all seem to be speaking about the same type of issues. So that's one interesting thought, and we definitely are curious to hear more details about the One Planet Network, but maybe here quite interesting at the end in terms of like engaging jointly at the country level. And I think that's really where we can bring added value by joining hands, that we can also bring in policymakers from the country level in the UNECE region. And here very crucial that we really bring it to the needs and specific interests of that region, which maybe has been left out a little bit in some of these global debates about circularity. So delighted to work with you in terms of what we can do for countries with economies in transition. Now, if we move to Ardita, if we move to the private sector, Ardita is joining us from ICC Albania. And ICC is supporting business on many issues and also on the circular economy transition. And I think, Ardita, you've been quite active in terms of bringing together companies on circular economy issues. And what tools, for example, do you have at your hand? What have you done in your specific region? Delighted to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be in this panel. Indeed, very fruitful and inspiring discussions today taking place. Yeah, coming to the point and about ICC, just to provide a little bit ground on the ICC. We are a global organization, so our primary work is to work with businesses independent on their size in every sector of the economy. And being in 100 countries, that puts a challenge on us in facing on the needs of the companies in that case. But how we work on two levels, on global level, and then we derive also on local context to try to find the needs and adapt accordingly to that. On a global level, our ICC headquarters, together with us in groups, we have worked on the circular economy topics on different perspectives. First of all, being a worldwide organization, it has access to many intergovernmental organizations, and as such, it uses this kind of position in order to recommend and advocate for these intergovernmental organizations take steps forward within themselves, but as well to talk to governments to take faster steps towards this transition. Just a quick example of recently with the World Trade, we have provided some global priorities for the World Trade Organization reform. And there are a few recommendations on trade and sustainability where a specific goal has been provided in terms of circular economy. So we are advocating at that level to have circular economy and trade cooperation or linkage better be defined, and as well to see how to open trade for circular economy products and services. At this point, also ICC has commissioned a report on the use of trade and how can trade help circular economy better transit in the upcoming terms. And once that report will be published, of course, we will also publish the results of that. But there is a work going in and supporting in that sense. Also, we work almost in every area of the economy. So with expert groups, we do put on the top of the agenda the sustainability, but also circularity now deriving in our products and services. Also tools and instruments that can be provided worldwide. One of those which was just recently, in fact, launched is the SME 360X. It is a digital platform that provides to SMEs access to to assess their impact on the environment. So it has several components going from energy efficiency to land use to recycling to CO2 emissions. And at the very end, for SMEs, which might sometimes lack, as you mentioned correctly, skills, time, and effort in that, that's a very quick exercise for them to let them know where they stand in their own market, in sectorial basis and in regional. So it provides this kind of comparison. At the same time, it serves also to big companies for their supply chain and to make this assessment also to their customers. So it's very important to go through all the line of the processes in that case. Now let's have only 2 words about the local aspect. So the region, I'm somehow in the Western Balkans. I have mentioned a couple of months ago that we are at the very early stages of the discourse, but also of having policies and every implementation on circular economy. I suppose also Professor Uskokovic will share more background on Serbia, but I think Serbia is one of the countries that has this roadmap, so it's then more advanced, let us say, than the other countries in that respect. However, since March and also having this discourse with international partners like you, for example, I would like to share what we have done in Albania. We have covered 4 kinds of elements that to put forward this agenda and discussion on circular economy. The practical aspects, so we have made an exchange and dissemination of best practices and raised awareness on the circular economy with the private sector here. I think there is also need for awareness, not businesses in this region and in these economies might know exactly how circular economy works and what it is about. So that's very important to have this part. On technical and finance, it was mentioned even before, and that has resulted to us cooperation with international partners and having technical assistance, but also access and ensuring access to suitable finance for circular economy topics. And a last point would be also the policy and legal perspective. In that sense, we have already recommended to our new government 5 priority areas, 3 of which have to do with trade, sustainability, and circular economy. So at this point, it's very important to work on different aspects and facets, so everybody gets to work at the same time. If I might just comment shortly on one thing, it was very interesting to see at the second question that the government and the business get equal points, like equal evaluations. We are 4.3 to 4.3, meaning that both of them need to lead and have commitment when it comes to circular economy. It should not be just a check in the box in terms of legislation without having proper implementation, but you cannot have implementation if you do not have clear policies and commitment and legislation on that side. So that would be shortly how ICC has come on this topic, both globally and on local level.
Many thanks, Ardita. And for looking at the different dimensions, on the one hand, ICC's work on the international policy side, and you've referred to this paper prepared by ICC in the run-up to WTO 12 Ministerial, where indeed sustainable trade and circular economy will play a role, and it's strongly mentioned in that background paper by ICC. And also hearing what you do specifically for the companies, including the small and medium-sized companies. Fascinated to hear about this 360 assessment, how exactly that would work. And your key message that maybe in Western Balkans, awareness raising is very important, and access to finance. And I guess the question of access to finance will also be on the top of list of issues, priority issues for UNECE, because that's really sort of like a key aspect there. Now, thank you for that, Ardita. Let's be joined by our third stakeholder representative, now from the academic side. And great pleasure to welcome Mr. Peter Uskokovic. Peter, you are joining us from University of Belgrade in Serbia. And you have been also looking at circular economy from the academic perspective. What can academia contribute to the debate we are having here today and to the debate in countries on that important issue?
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And I would like to thank also, not to forget Ardita for kind words to our progress in CE regulations. I would like to say that everything usually starts with academia in scientific point of view. But this time it is the CE concept is going rather fast, actually going very quickly to give some solutions to the general green economy, to give some solutions to environmental protection, in general to industrial environment. So what can academia do in generally? I can give you two approaches on this. First one is related to research and science. And it's actually giving the solutions to some industrial processes, not some, to many of them that can be resolved and changed during this transition. The second one is actually the education purpose, and that is to first train students, then put it on high schools even, to give the, let's say, the concept of CE as soon as possible to younger generations, and then provide, of course, the informal education with companies, with other stakeholders. So there are actually two parts, because actually resolving innovation and needs is something that academia will approach very soon. I think it is already in place. And if we go into specific industries, we will see that after this part of raising awareness to this issue, we now have go to specific industries and topics. Every manufactured process needs to be changed in that if we want to really achieve the goals of circular economy. And the final goal is something that is very, very difficult to achieve. From the circularity gap report that we have now, that is about 8 to 9% of recovery of materials, we will have to achieve actually zero or 100% of recovery, because in the basic idea of circular economy, there is no waste at all. So all materials have to be transformed, they have to be used several times, they have to be sold several times, generate profit several times, and then they have to actually disappear in, let's say, landfillers or something like that. So as you see, in every manufacturing process, we will have to need a lot of specific targets, specific expertises. And this is only if we speak about technological frame. Further, if we want to control the process, we have to integrate actually the law. We have, because of the IP protection, we have to integrate the legislations. We have to be in constant contact with the regulations of countries, of European Commissions, and wider ones. And of course, at the end, we have to see the volatile compounds, we have to eliminate them in the process. So as you see, this is a very technologically demanding task in order to achieve the goals that CE puts in front of us. As for the preparing the, of course, documentation for it, the academia is also having this in place. Maybe I will speak about it later, about our role of our faculty in the preparation of the strategy or the program and the action plan. And of course, the constant link between the economy, the industry, and the government is in place. So, and to go to the end, the third point that, of course, is very, very, very interesting is that after the academia helps the CE conversion and the CE process, academia has to be transformed also, because now we have, let's say, a multi-sectional task. We have a lot of disciplines integrated. So there is no now engineering separately or natural sciences or social sciences. Now they all have to melt, to make a network in order to realize these problems, in order to organize them, to technically resolve them, and then put them into public and match it with the regulations. So I think the academia will need, besides the, of course, the financial support to change the mindset, to change the lab equipment at least. Besides that, we need the support in general of the society, of companies, of ministries, in order to help us to change our curricula and match the goals that are desired from us.
Thank you very much, Peter, for these remarks. And as you said, like everything starts with academia. Very important, the role in creation of research and evidence, and also the educational role of academia. And very interesting also what you said about the two entry points, the technological side of things and the manufacturing processes, and the regulatory policies making side of things. And to conclude, as you mentioned, that circular economy, also academia will have to be transformed in one way or the other. And here, I think I heard that idea of breaking down the silos, integrating the different work streams and departments, because circularity really requires us to sort of take a whole of government or a whole of research or a whole of policy making approach. So many thanks for that. Now we have time for a second round. And let me come back to Jorge. From your experience as UNEP, Jorge, are there any sort of like best practices you have seen around the globe that might be particularly interesting for countries with economies in transition? And a large part of UNECE membership is really countries with economies in transition. So what can they sort of like pick from in terms of what you have seen globally?
Thank you. Indeed, there are quite a number of experiences that are very interesting. The first one I would like to say it is that we have had, since the launch of the One Planet Network in 2012, we have done quite a substantive amount of work in collecting information, monitoring impacts of the development and implementation of policies, projects, tools, and methodologies related to circular economy and resource efficiency. So the first message here, it is that the region is not starting from scratch. There is a substantial amount of work that has been done. There are quite a number of very interesting approaches, policies, and initiatives that have taken place. I have mentioned two already that we find extremely significant. The case of Kazakhstan working through the Partnership for an Inclusive Green Economy in creating national strategies. We have also heard by now the very good example as well of the work that has taken place in Georgia, which is very, very admirable. So we're not starting from scratch. But what we need is to really aggregate that information and ensure that we coordinate our efforts and monitor globally the implementation of, we ensure that our national efforts, regional efforts, contribute to the implementation and monitoring of SDG 12. In the past years, members of the network, as a matter of fact, and based on the experience that we had, have reported very useful information about sustainable consumption and production, and indeed circular economy policies in countries like Albania, we have just heard, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Montenegro, Serbia, Turkey, amongst many others. The key point here, and it is one in which I will really want us to emphasize, is this holistic approach that tackles resource efficiency, procurement, waste management across various sectors. This can be agriculture, food and beverage, energy, buildings, construction, tourism, and consumer goods. Why is this so important? And we heard it from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We heard it also from the European Commission. We heard it also from the high-level speaker from Russian Federation. It is that circular economy, if it stays in just the abstract speeches of politicians, it's not going to really derive its impact if it does not really include a complete mindset of the way our economies are, as a matter of fact, anchored, created, and the way we value our products and our processes. So it really has to dig deeper, and that it's a very challenging work, and it's really important that we tackle it holistically. To this end, and we have heard it, a second lesson learned that we have taken is this cross-sectoral and systemic approach, which does, as a matter of fact, demonstrate that the region as a whole is ready to further develop and implement circular solutions. So we, as a matter of fact, in addition, we have identified and mapped a range of projects, tools, and methodologies that have been implemented already in at least 17 of the UNECE transition economies. We believe that this is a good place to start. And I will conclude by mentioning just 3 areas where we believe it's important that we take as a priority as we develop this very important project. One, it's offering at the country level a one-stop shop for governments to officially report on the implementation of the policies, the actions that they're doing, but also to obtain the methodologies, the tools that can help them transition to a circular economy. So promoting the holistic approach and the one-stop shop is the first message. Second, highlighting the visibility of the policy, celebrating the successes, and this is important to keep us engaged regularly through these types of platforms and others that we can organize through the countries to celebrate the successes, to share the good experiences. The last two, I think it's important, and it is that we work on existing global frameworks that have been already adopted at the global level to not ensure that our efforts are consistent with the climate agenda, with the biodiversity and pollution agendas, and also with the sustainable consumption and production agenda. And by working through these normative frameworks on climate, biodiversity, and pollution through circular approaches is key. I will mention a very concrete example here that we would like to offer. Working with UNDP and UNFCCC, we are launching a second edition of our toolkit on how to integrate circular economy approaches into the nationally determined contributions and the long-term low-emission development strategies that will be just in a few weeks or next week communicated by your high-level decision makers at COP26. This is a very concrete way in which we can help your countries in the region, in the UNECE region, particularly those in transition, to avoid duplication of their national efforts at the global level. And we have intend to work in a number of other areas, biodiversity and pollution as well, working with your national focal points that are reporting the work that you are doing in implementing your commitments at the global level in those very important multilateral agreements. Trade is an important area that we look at exploring, and the role of innovation as well. So there are a number of tools, there are a number of initiatives, and we believe that today we're taking a very important step forward. And we want to stay engaged and really ensuring that we track our efforts. I think that monitoring is key, that we set goals and we try to stick to them and advance in a supportive way. That's the message that we have heard.
Great, thank you, Jorge. All very encouraging messages. The region is not starting from scratch. Yeah, there are successes to be highlighted. The holistic approach we've heard on many occasions, and also the importance of integrating that debate in other existing debates. So many thanks for highlighting this and for joining us for the project and the rollout. Let me now turn back to Ardita. Ardita, is there something else you would like to share from the perspective of ICC, maybe about international trade, investment, or SMEs? Any concluding thoughts you would want to make?
Thank you. Well, international trade is the engine of the economy. So when we are talking about circularity, of course, that international trade plays a very important role in the supply chain and the circularity of the supply chain. If we take a country like all the countries in the region are aspiring to enter into the EU, so they are working on the legislation and the implementation side in order to be available for this European Union market. So we are even both in export and import depending and having a lot of flows with the EU on both sides, meaning that we have to fulfill certain requirements and criteria and standards that these countries have already developed so far. And in that sense means that all the SMEs together with government and all of us need to be more competitive in this case. So we need to raise up to different dialogue and to different engagements in this sense. So from a point of view from the private sector and the SMEs, it's very important to start seeing this process and start embracing all these kind of initiatives that needs to move and transit from a linear to a more circular economy if we want to stand in this market and to cooperate with other countries. On the investment side is also the same. And let me give again the example with the EU. In November 2020, the EU has launched, and it has been approved also by our countries, the economic and investment plan, as well the green agenda for the Western Balkans, making an imperative prerequisite for all the countries, if they want to invest, they need to focus on topics related to circular economy, to biodiversity, food and agriculture systems, and others. There are 5 topics on this area. meaning that there is a sort of focus where these countries need to focus. The governments cannot do alone. They can do legislations, public consultations on that, but they need also to see how from the perspective of implementation this can be feasible and can be achievable in a very short and swiftly time. So in that sense, I think public-private dialogue is very important, and also bringing together on the table other actors such as academia and also international partners. We already mentioned, but it's very important to, especially for countries that needs to make this transition at the earliest convenience, they need to have all these discourse being very inclusive. As for SMEs, there is an opportunity, of course, independent of the obstacles which I'm not mentioning here, but there is opportunity to have innovative products. And we mentioned a lot of products, but also I would like to jump in about services. In our region, our economies are a lot dependent or are mostly in their structures based on services. So together with products, we have also to make circularity of services and think about how they should go hand in hand with each other, because that's how our economic structures offers us. So we have to think also about that. And it's also an opportunity to offer different products that become more competitive, the SMEs, while approaching all of these circular economy practices. And at the very end, also meeting with sustainable development goals and sustainability. That's in short, and to keep up with the time would be my perspective from the private sector.
Many thanks, Ardita. And as I said, like trade is the engine of the economy. So we do need to look at trade, and particularly in the Western Balkans, trade-related questions with the EU are an important aspect. And you also focused on or flagged other trade-related topics like investment, financing, innovation, and I think they are all quite important, and we need to look at them. And last but not least, we've not discussed so much about services per se, but we shouldn't forget about the importance of the services economy in the circularity transition, and I definitely put that on the record for us somewhere. Now, let us move to Peter. And Peter, we've talked quite a bit about circular economy roadmaps and strategies, and I understand Serbia also has one, and you have been involved in the creation of that strategy. Is there some concluding remarks you would like to share? And do trade and economic cooperation issues play a role in that strategy in one way or the other? The floor is yours.
Well, yes, there were a lot of activities in our society recently related to various ministries, various funding bodies such as the Swedish SIDA, then the Association of Nordic Countries helping Serbia transition to circular economy. But I will just give you a few remarks related to the Serbian roadmap by UNDP Belgrade. It is actually focused on manufacturing industry, agriculture and food, plastics and packaging, and construction. As related to the program and the action plan that we are working on with the Ministry of Environmental Protection, I can give several main topics or main aims that are targeted. First is support to the industrial sector. Another one is support to the municipalities in order to achieve the circular economy industrial standards and circular economy societies. Then it is improving on waste management system. Then we have introducing of green public procurement. And finally, something that again academia is interested in, it is support to innovation and let's say the application of smart specialization strategy in the CE environment. And the last one, but not of course the least, is educational institutions and their role into the process of public awareness and then specific trainings till, of course, the emerging of some new technologies and science related to the process. These are the main issues related to our two documents. Of course, there are more of them, but there is no time to focus on all of them. But now I have to conclude it that the chance for UNECE countries in general in this and the Western Balkan countries in this transition of the industry is related to that the difference between high performance and low performance industry gets smaller if you introduce the new concept. Let me make just one example. If we're now in the role, let's say the era of nanotechnologies, where you need a lot of expensive equipment, lot of companies around, lot of national funding, then we are trailing. But when we move to the circular economy processing, which needs conventional technologies to be applied in very specific ways, then we can be competitive with the, let's say, the richest regions. For instance, if we want to do simple reuse of, let's say, paper, if you want to reuse it several times and you want to get cellulose again, you will have to use a lot of chemicals. All of these chemicals and solvents have to be recycled in the process. So it gives us a new paradigm in science in generally, and this is a very large chance of the whole region, of the institutions in the region. Of course, we started this process by collaborating before several years with a large Swiss company that wants to work in the concept of circular economy. So now, as you see, the boundaries are getting invisible. Simply, it is important what you know. Do you want to dedicate it? Do you have people that are adopting this CE concept in their work and the way of thinking? And then if we speak about the role of trade, I have to associate one very important concept to the role of trade. It is the concept of marketing, because you will see that in future, when you change your product, when you change the components of your product, when you change the starting materials, the companies will have to invest a lot in a marketing, because now they have to, let's say, give the market the confidence in their new product. This is a very, very large chance of course, everybody. And of course, again, the boundaries are going to get invisible, because for this, we need a lot of communication. This is a very expensive process. So trading can in very, very much help this marketing issue that will appear in future. And of course, the digital basis, so that today what we see as a waste tomorrow has to become, let's say, a new material, input material, and maybe will became even a commodity. So the information have to travel, the marketing has to be changed, and of course the new positions and new working places will be created if we follow this concept. This means, of course, that we will contribute to the brain drain problem, which is maybe the largest problem that we have in the region. Specifically, we will have new places and, of course, new challenges for talented people to resolve them in the spot where they are. Because, as we see, the traveling of the commodities and knowledge will be very, very, very fast in the CE in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Very inspiring also here at the end. And I guess really it's this new paradigm we are seeing here. And it's great what you mentioned, that there are actually opportunities and for the private sector in the UNECE region, in the Western Balkan region. And as you mentioned, there are front runners, there are competitive companies in many of these segments already. And that's definitely something to build on. I also loved what you say in terms of trade. Maybe it's not only about market access, but also marketing, and an important dimension here too. So with this, I think we've come to the conclusion of our debate. It's been an extremely rich and enjoyable debate, and I've really thoroughly enjoyed listening to all of you and want to thank you here. I luckily don't have the task of summarizing it all. I will be gladly putting that task and that request to Mr. Dimitri Mariasin, who has joined us. He is the Deputy Executive Secretary of UNECE. And I'm very glad, Dimitri, that you did find the time to join us, I guess, for most of the session. Maybe before we pass the floor to you, let me conclude from my side with a word of thanks. A thank you to all the speakers for sharing your insights and your vision and your experiences, and also to the support team of the speakers, because we've had so many really inspiring and fun conversations in the preparation of this event. So many thanks in that regard. Big thank you to colleagues from UNDP for the IT support, and that was really a translation that's greatly appreciated. And last but not least, big thank you also to the UNECE team, particularly Lana and Eva, who've really been wonderful in helping me prepare for today's debate, and I think who have been instrumental in making it a success. I feel very confident that with the richness of views shared today at UNECE, we can take that forward. And I'm delighted also to see that the specific topics we in the Economic Cooperation and Trade Division are working on trade issues, innovation issues, supply chain issues, procurement issues, specific sectors such as textiles or agri-food, that they have all come up in the debate here today. And it's going to be a great pleasure for me to take that forward with all of you. So with this, I'd pass the floor to Mr. Mariasin. Let us take Dimitri, but we can put you on the screen.
Yes.
We can hear you. There you are. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And let me start by thanking you for your excellent moderation and for steering us through a very complex topic with a wonderful set of speakers today on a subject that has become central to UNECE's work over the past year or so, and will continue to be a central theme for the Commission going forward. As our Executive Secretary mentioned, we made a very deliberate choice by putting circularity and sustainable use of natural resources at the center of the Commission's effort. We care about it from both the environmental and the economic point of view, and really important to hear that both dimensions resonate more and more, both in terms of how circular approaches contribute, for example, to climate agenda, and in terms of what we see as an emerging set of business models that really make it good for business. We need to continue following through on the commitments that our member states have made at the Commission session, and even more importantly, that member states made when they adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, because we really see that circular economy and sustainable use of natural resources is a direct contributor to not just SDG 12 achievement, but to many others, because it is about changes in behavior, it is about new thinking, new governance models, new financing approaches, crowding in much cleaner and greener finance, for example, underpinned by circular approaches, are all the questions that we'd like to see in the future as central to our work. I'd like to very quickly, without trying to summarize the very rich discussion of over 2 hours, to pinpoint to a number of key ideas that I think have emerged in today's discussion. And what we heard, for example, from Kazakhstan, a really important advanced example of a national policy framework integrating circular economy as part of a broader greener agenda and economic transition agenda, where the deputy minister from Kazakhstan spoke about the cross-sectoral effort, the whole of government approach, and the importance of financing. And for us, what matters is that we actually do tackle the question of how do we introduce circularity approaches in sectors where this may not be an expected or an obvious move. For example, in the oil sector, and I think example of Kazakhstan and efforts in Kazakhstan along those lines will be interesting to watch going forward, and we as SE stand ready to support. We heard from Jocelyn, and I'd like to once again thank Helen MacArthur Foundation for the strong partnership over the past year or so, and hoping for much more going forward, about the environmental and economic sides of the story. And I think here, what really matters is that we are able to tell the story with figures. We're able to tell the story with business model conversation. And this is precisely what Helen MacArthur Foundation are doing, and we're happy to join forces with them. We heard from the European Commission about the need for a strategic approach, and Elizabeth already referred to the regulatory aspect of it, where the European Union is leading, I would say, the global efforts in that sense by adopting a number of breakthrough regulations, but also its global vision. I think the notion that circularity is not just for the rich countries. It is not about some kind of sustainability island approach, but really a global phenomenon. And we actually, as ECE, are advocating this with other UN regional commissions. And when we hear that, but circular economy is probably just for the UNECE region, we say, no, it's precisely for countries that find themselves in a very difficult situation economically and socially, that they have a chance to rethink the business models and leapfrog without repeating the mistakes that many of the industrialized or so-called industrialized nations have made along the route of their development. The European Union also spoke about the importance of circular economy as part of the Green Deal. We are looking forward to partnering with the European Union on this, on making sure that we can join forces, both in terms of regulatory agenda there, but also how we jointly can support the program countries in our region when it comes to embracing the Green Deal's principles, but also specifically addressing the potential for circular economy in the program countries in the European Union's neighborhood. We also, I think, need to think together how we can work more closely on digitalization and circularity. The digital product passport was mentioned, and I think this is a great example of a very concrete step. And I think several speakers today mentioned digital as a topic, and we at the ECE are planning to look very seriously at this, including the link between circularity and digital. It was great to hear from the Russian Federation when it comes to a very ambitious agenda that the government of Russia and the private sector of Russia. I really would like to emphasize there that we already know about examples from Russia where private sector is taking the lead. We heard about this at the presentation at our commission session in April, and we heard about this from Alexander earlier today. The incentives for businesses to switch to greener production is the key word for me there, and how we can then jointly work to make sure that this has then a cross-border perspective, a trade perspective as well, that such incentives do not create unfair competition, but rather actually create synergies for cross-border trade with traceability and much more resource-efficient approaches in global trade. We heard another very impressive presentation from Georgia. Georgia is known to be a pioneer in many ways in environmental governance in the region, as well as in applying the environmental thinking and progressive approaches to investment to its economy. I think what we heard about the financing side is very important. In case of Georgia, also the fact that the work at municipal level took a center stage, and waste management plans as one example of a broader circularity ecosystem have become a part and parcel of municipal governance is, I think, a very important message. And we at ECE are working very closely with city governments, increasingly, including through our Forum of Mayors, working on localizing SDGs. And I believe that Georgian experience and the way we, both at policy level, financing, involving municipalities, working with SMEs at local level, can really move the needle on circular economy. Is a very useful experience from Georgia to learn from. I'd like to very much thank UNEC for being with us in this joint work, along with UNDP, and also for bringing a number of really important insights to the discussion. Of course, the political commitment and the need for regulatory guidance is something that all speakers, including UNEP, referred to, but it is especially the standardization and labeling that I think matters. And we took note of several suggestions made there. Perhaps now when people hear the word QR code, they think about something completely different globally. I hope we can change that. And I hope we can talk about circular economy QR codes, traceability QR codes, and forget about the pandemic QR codes soon enough. But definitely, jokes aside, this is an area where UNECE and UNEP and others can join forces. We already have some very concrete tools in our toolkit, and again, digitalization, circularity come forward. We also had heard two really excellent presentations from the Western Balkans. I think the idea of a 300-degree assessment that the ICC from Albania brought to the table is an excellent one, because we tend to think about oh, this is a new approach. We know how to do this. Let's bring everybody on board. In fact, there are so many initiatives out there, and there's so much feedback that may be given by various actors on what the government can do, what regulations should be, on what some of the incentive structures should be. We heard about incentives several times today. And then, of course, the role of SMEs in circularity efforts. I really believe that we need to create a movement. We need to create a sense that this is trendy, that this is a niche, that this is a set of business opportunities also for small and medium enterprises. At UNECE, we're going to be coming back to the topic of SMEs more and more. In Elizabeth's team is working now very hard to launch a number of ambitious efforts for SMEs, overall growth of SMEs in the post-pandemic environment. I think if we can link the two, and if we can see how a new generation of SME activity can also be much more resource efficient as a very minimum, but actually promoting circularity approaches ideally would be excellent. The view from Serbia and the role of academia, and how the academia and the private sector can link up and work together, for me was very inspirational. The fact that we have to talk about education, and so start at the very beginning, because circular economy is a behavior change, first and foremost. Also at the consumer side, but also at the producer side. This is where I think academia can play a big role, but we also need academia to step in with sound analytical frameworks. We need to have much stronger data sets for circularity. For example, today, and I invite all of you colleagues to join efforts with us and to provide inputs. Our statistics division is working in the next year or so on approaches to measuring circularity. We found that there is no one commonly agreed definition of circularity, circular economy right now. We're working very closely with OECD, Eurostat, and others on this topic, and I hope that our partners from the academia can also join forces with us in that regard, in addition to the very important role in environmental education and other education-related aspects. So this is an imperfect and just brief summary of what we heard today. I think each of these key insights creates an opportunity for us as ECE to take action within this project and other projects. I'm also pleased to let you know that we will be launching a series of policy briefs on circular economy within this project and beyond, and we would like to make some of them really cross-sectoral and look at such issues, for example, as financing for circular economy, such issues as institutional arrangements for circular economy, and digitalization and circular economy. We will be doing each of these policy briefs in partnership with leading institutions and around the region, and we invite you to please join us in this analytical work, and the work that would be not just purely research or academic, but also will hopefully create a compendium of best practices that our member states can then use directly in their policy making and practice. So these policy briefs will be launched very soon. You'll hear more about it. There will be other topics which will be more sectoral, including funded by the UNDA project that we launched today. And I really hope that we can meet many more times and go into detail on some of these very specific issues that I've mentioned. Finally, I'd like to make a number of thanks. First of all, the team, Elizabeth, Lana, and Eva for your very hard work on making this event possible and on making it a success as well. Our key partners, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra. Of course, we heard from UNEP. We know that UNDP is partnering with us on this. We really appreciate the inputs from the European Commission and many other partners around the region. We hope that these events will be regular. We hope that this is just the beginning of a series of policy dialogues, and we stand ready to partner with many of you in organizing such events in the future. Partnerships for circular economy is going to be our approach. And finally, we really hope, again, that a few years later, we will be able to say that together we've made a measurable impact on how this region is faring in terms of its circular economy track record. As our executive secretary has said, we would like to see the entire EC region go above a 2-digit circularity rate. We hope that we can then also be able to, that we will also be able to measure how we've made an impact on the region's climate change, mitigation and adaptation record, and how we overall have supported our countries in the transition to greener, more sustainable, more inclusive economy, and achieving the sustainable development goals. With this, colleagues, I'd like to thank everybody for being with us today, for your presentations, for all your questions, and once again, thanking the team for the organization efforts and UNDP for the support and organizing. I'd like to then bring this meeting to a close. Thank you.
Thank you all. I think we can finish. Elizabeth, unless you have a few words, I think we can finish the meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you.